off. I've got some minor things I need to fix with the mouse path generator, including then I want to be able to save files. I'm going to start with adding just so I can save selectively. Um, and I've got a couple of things that I think I can do to fix. I have a note that the path extensions aren't working correctly. I think mostly they're still not filling in most of the board, and that may just be because it's only doing one iteration. So what I want to do is take the potential extension part, which is all this attempt to improve path, and I want to move that into a function so that I can call it multiple times. Alright, so if I improve the path, it's assumed to be the test path. I don't have to give it a start or finish, it's going to do the whole path. I don't think I have to pass it anything else. No, don't build. Dang it. Fine, do your thing. Get my cursor back. Not what I wanted to do. My fingers are just doing their own crap again. Alright, so improved path is basically all of this. Alright, we're going to start a path improvement. I'm not moving the index. I have a couple of updates in here that I was thinking about just before coming online, which I think will improve this a little bit. Primarily, it seemed that and I think this had to do with the current index not staying in step. And so the start and finish were moving apart and they weren't adjacent anymore, which was going to cause trouble. Because if I insert anything then, any segments between them, any elements between start and finish in the current path are lost as soon as they point to the inserted path. And it's a memory leak because those cells are now they're still added to the listed cells. They still exist as listed cells. They're just not part of the list. And it won't be cleared. So, just reading through this again. Okay, so the initial part should be fine. Here toward the end, I don't need to do that. Okay, so it's going to increment start and finish, and this is what I wanted to change. So instead of setting the start to where the finish is, which is what will bypass any inserted loop, also relies on finish not having moved I don't know why it would move, but I should be able to, at this point, just say I want to do this. No, I don't need to do that. I just need to set it to PS get next. So currently my cell should be something because it just went through here. Get next might be a null pointer. Although it shouldn't be, because before the start cell can get to the end of the list, the finish cell should get there first. And the finish cell gets to the end of the list, it should exit this loop. So instead of getting it from finish, it just gets it from its own next. This means if I insert a smaller loop onto the main, it will now move that direction onto the smaller loop for the next iteration. The rest of this should work the same. It's going to get the cell for the new pointer. It's going to create something to log. And then finish, even if finish was already past the inserted loop, finish now jumps up and is now the next cell after start. So if start is now taken off another route, finish moves along with. It is completely dependent on where start is. This was to just keep it from jumping ahead, but this is actually better than making the assumption that it's always in the right place. It's specifically at the very next cell, always. And if it's a null pointer, it's going to exit with a -1. And then it's going to add the path to the test board. So build a simple path and add it. Improve the path. So then what I should be able to do here I was thinking I could try to keep looping until the number of unused spaces is below a certain threshold. But I really don't want that. I don't know what the arbitrary number would be. What's a valid number of blocks to have? There just needs to be some. There should be some blocks, just not too many. And I don't have any idea what the number is. So I'm going to let this go ahead and run the way it is. So I'm going to say it's going to run 5 iterations. It's going to try 5 times to improve the path from one end to the other. Alright, so I haven't made a significant change. I just took the code out. Essentially it's intact. It's exactly the same, except that I changed where it gets the new pointer for the next start. And now I'm calling it in a loop. But it's still enough of a change that I could have broken something. I don't see any errors in the code, but I could have broken it. I'm very good at breaking it. Alright, it's recompiled. Let's go to mouse path, generate. There I have a port I've generated. And let's see what it did. So this is the initial puzzle board. Starts path improvement. Cells. 20 cells would have been enough, since I lowered the threshold. 2 is not enough. These don't match. 20 cells would have been enough. Since I made it, I think 10 cells is enough if there's... But it doesn't look like it did anything. So what it looks like it may have done... It may be that it determined that these had available cell. Well, no, it should be using the one that gets returned, the cell that gets returned. It's not randomly picking a new one. So the cell that gets returned, and they had 20 apiece, should have been the start point and the finish point. Apparently it couldn't do it. I'm not seeing any added segments, although it's still going. Still hitting 20 cells. There's 20 cells in this block right here. Although it's not great to use because it couldn't make a path going out and then back again, but still should have been able to put in even small segments to extend that. And I would think it would have come up with some, even if it wasn't very many. I did not see anything get inserted into this path. These other blocks I think are all too small. Yeah, even this one's only 9. But this should have been able to do and did not. So, what I'm considering is, rather than... This one's extra simplistic. I just don't like this one mostly because it's got about half of the board is this one single path, which is really trivial to do. This upper part could be a little more complicated. It's really hard to tell. So what I'm thinking is, rather than looking at these to determine whether or not it's a valid puzzle worth saving, because I'm not sure if I can really improve it much more at this point. And this is after looping through 5 times, and it still couldn't do anything. It, for whatever reason, did not manage to make any improvements to the path. I wonder what happens if I get a... I'm looking for, see if I get one that's like less than half the map like I got before. Not seeing it. Maybe I am getting improvements then on some of these. They're not as bad as some of the earlier ones that I've gotten. So, and this one fills in most of it. So, it'd be worth it at this point then, I think, to stop painting what the path generated was and to make this, to just take whatever puzzle is developed and send that as a game file. And to do that, I think I just need to turn it into a string. If I turn it into a string board, then the game can load it and hold on to the string. And then if I decide it's worth keeping, I can save it, and it should add the string to my file. That's the idea, anyways. So, There's maybe some other things I could do to improve this algorithm, but I don't seem to be gaining any ground, and they are filling up the puzzle for the most part. So what I need is repeat puzzles, edit, okay. So I've created a section at the end for algorithm created puzzles. It's just a comment, so it doesn't really matter. But it means if I want to insert any, like, if I find more pre-built ones, I can put them before this. And so that'll allow, then the algorithm could just add puzzles to the end of the file, which is kind of what I want. That's the idea anyways. So what I need then, I need to look at what the program uses, and I probably need to look at the way it does its preview, because I think the preview is actually opening the file every time it refreshes the screen, which I need to stop. So if it loads a board with an index, it gets the line, make sure it's not a comment, and a puzzle fits on a single line. It parses it for size. Because this is where having, and I haven't done this on some of the earlier code, this is where having, if I had made a puzzle board class, instead of having it just be, because right now it's an array of cells, and then 2 numbers defining the dimensions of the array, which are also used to determine the total size of the array. But if I turn this into a class object, all of that stuff would be handled together. It would be easier to pass information back and forth between them. When I'm doing a test class or test instance, I can just delete the whole thing and create a new one. And then when I'm done, I can pass a new instance of the puzzle back to the game. And I'm inclined to do that. This may generate more trouble than it's worth, but this is what I'd like to do. So, to do this, I need a new class to start. That's the first thing I need. Board. It's really a board, it's more of the puzzle. It's more the puzzle itself. And of course I can't look at that. Cancel. Why would it want to let you look at the list of names if you're trying to make a new name? Because that would be ridiculous. It's a new class. Personal preference. Alright, mouse path puzzle needs mouse path cell. It doesn't need the list. The list is only needed for creating one. List and listed cell. It doesn't need a mouse. And it doesn't need a window interface or any of the drawings. It just needs to store the data, so mouse path domain will take care of the drawing. So it's just going to have an array of cells. So alright, so I need to look at what is being held in here that should now be a part of this class. I might add logging. What it's doing here is really trivial. I'm not going to worry about that yet. I might add logging later, but I don't think I'm going to need it. I don't need a menu. It doesn't need a file name. It does need to have a board. It does need to have dimensions, an array size, it also needs for this I'll have to include string. The origin string is the I could break it apart because the algorithm right now, when it opens up and pulls out this puzzle string, it parses and breaks it apart, but I'm not going to do that. I want the origin string to be the string as passed, as read from the file. And so it'll get the file, mouse path will open the file, iterate through to the puzzle, pass the string as part of the constructor for the puzzle, and then it will parse the string and do the work. So then when I use the automatically created, all it has to do is generate the origin string, and it can use that to create a new instance of the puzzle. With this origin string then, if this contains it and holds it the entire time, if it's a algorithm generated puzzle, I can select save from the main game if it turns out to be a really nice puzzle, and all it has to do is add this origin string to the file. Piece of cake. Now I just have to make it happen. Okay. I don't need an index. It doesn't care. It doesn't care how many puzzles there are. It doesn't care about this. It is start and finish. Don't care. It doesn't care about scaling. It doesn't care about the dimensions. It's already got its own dimensions. All this test stuff has to do with generating. Test path. The mouse doesn't have anything to do with the board and all this stuff. Doesn't matter. Window interface I don't need. Cell size doesn't matter. Offsets, no drawings, so it doesn't matter. Okay. So to generate this, I'm going to say it requires the string, which you can parse to make the puzzle. I'm not going to allow it to change the puzzle afterwards. If you want a new puzzle, you have to create a new instance and delete the old one. Alright, so this is just going to take the string and create the board from it. I don't have to pass it the string because the string is actually here. So I need to be able to see needs to be able to get a cell. And I need to be able to do this by index or by X and Y coordinates. Need to be able to get the size. I can't return this as a size unless I include window interface. This mouse path cell includes it. Yeah, it's not gonna let me do that. It's not as easy as just passing it one, but it'll work. So, and using that I can determine array size. Now, I shouldn't need array size at mouse path now. I should be able to handle it internally, but it does need to know the horizontal and vertical. It needs to be able to get an individual cell, and I need to be able to get the string back. So that it can be saved. That should be enough. I think that'll let me do, it now encapsulates the puzzle into one class. For the time being, I think this is enough access to allow me to use it. class first, but that's alright. We go. Okay. I need puzzle board. Come on. I have to look at my fingers. They're just doing their own thing. Dancing on the keyboard. I don't need that. Max. Of course I didn't mean mine. I meant the whatever Microsoft had as a variable or name for something else when I meant. Okay. And then I've just got my strings, so the first thing I have to do is call generate board. And then that will take this string and populate these values. When I'm done, if puzzle board unequal my fault for starting something with the word array. Okay, that should be enough. Generating board, I'm going to copy that out of the other code. So it's just parsing that string to populate everything. So let's do So if for some reason I get a bad index, it's going to return a null pointer instead of crashing. It's possible, although unlikely, that this would be a valid index, but still be a null pointer, but it shouldn't be. So that would be a different issue if that comes about. Oh, if I'm just using this, I need to have a get index. I'm missing a function to use with that. Get index is fairly trivial and exists in here, although this one was edited to work with two different scales, and I don't really want that. If I go look at Minefield, this should have a get index, which will work. Yeah. So it takes the y value times the maximum x, which coincidentally is the same variable I'm using here, plus x. And that gives me an index value for the array. This is because I'm not using a two-dimensional array, I'm using a one-dimensional array, but I want to be able to access it using two-dimensional coordinates. Okay, so I need some exceptions in here. So let's do this. I need the whole thing. Alright, so make sure everything's in range, not just in terms of, this is making sure it's in terms of the array, but making sure that I'm not getting coordinates that are off the edge. So if I get a maximum x that's, say, too high, but the y value is in range, what it's going to do is wrap around to the next line, which I don't want it to do. I want it to go, no, that's not valid. So it has to fit within these ranges and have a valid index. Mistyped it twice and it still let me fill it. I was surprised by that. Usually it gives up very early on. Okay, so now I need to get the generate board, which is actually a part of mouse path. I'll just copy it out of here. So it's loading the board. All this part will stay here because this is going based on this index to go through the file and iterate till it finds the puzzle, which is this. So if I'm on the right counter, file puzzle. It's going to close. So by the time I get down here, file puzzle is what I need. So this is creating also initialized board. This is the first part. Is parsing the string to get the size. And it needs to be using, oh, I didn't actually assign my string here. String is O. So this should be maximum X. Y. Just make sure I'm not changing names here. On some of these where I was parsing puzzle files as I was loading them, I kept changing the name of the string at each step. It doesn't look like it did that here. So it finds the comma, makes a substring up to the first comma, and changes that to an integer, assigns that. I do make a new string then. So remainder then is a new string, which is everything after comma. Find the second comma in remainder, so that's fine. Let's go to remainder, second comma, and then puzzle. So at this point I got a string called puzzle, which is the end of this total string to begin with. So I pulled out the two coordinates at the beginning, and the rest of this is a string in quotes, which is the puzzle. Okay. So now that I've got my X and Y, and I've got puzzle string, I have to create the board, and that's going to be, again, just copying a bunch of code out of here. So initialize board. So it's sending an X and Y, and then the puzzle string. Okay, this is stuff related to playing the game. I don't really need that. I'm going to copy this, but I don't really need that part of the code because it's internal to the class now, including those. So those are going to go by the side here in just a moment. Okay, so I don't need to stop mouse. I don't need to remove board. If I want to change the board, I'm going to get a whole new one. I don't need to reassign those. They are already assigned. Array size is going to be that. I did change the name of this to puzzle board. That's going to iterate through the array. B is probably the string. It was string. Okay, so that's... So my string at this point is puzzle. So it's iterating through the string, extracting characters. Space is blank. If it's not a space, then it's either a wall or start or finish. I think wall is 1, start and finish are 2 and 3. I do not have a start index. I don't think I need a start index here. I just need to flag the cells. This has got to be capturing it for some other reason within the game. It's got nothing to do with initializing the board, because the board's going to initialize with these values. Okay, so this should initialize my board based on a string input. So now I got to go back to here and make this use the board class that it was not using. Don't think I need that. Probably don't need that. Let's see. See how much I can get away with. So if I add board, I don't really need, I kind of need cells, but if I add board, I get cells. Oh, I'm sorry, it's puzzle. Or puzzle board, make it more confusing. Okay, so within this then, instead of tracking an array, it's going to track a puzzle, which is the board. Although now it's not going to act as an array. Anything that's calling board is going to have to interact with that differently. It's keeping a size, it's keeping an array size, that's fine. These other things it really needs to do its work. Some of these will change, things that interact with the board. Loading board by an index is fine. Initializing the board, it doesn't have to do, well, it does a little bit that's not part of the board class. If it paints the start and finish as a block, I'm not sure what those are being used for. Oh, those are being, I know what they're being used for. They're being used for where to start the mouse. Where to position the mouse when it runs. It tells it where the mouse is and where it's done. So I might want to capture those as part of the puzzle class so that they can be easily drawn out without having to iterate through the board to find them. Okay, so I just closed it and now I got to go back to the puzzle. The surest way to find out what you're missing is to close the file, and then you realize I had more things I needed in there. And so those are going to be things that are actually at the top of this, which was start index, finish index. The rest of this stuff, that should be enough. Okay, so I'm not going to set those because those will be set by the generating the puzzle, but I do want to be able to get those. Please all join class. Okay, so start, and I'm going to have to add that segment in here, generating the board that I took out. This bit. Alright, so if I get a 2, that's the start, and if I get a 3, that's the finish. If I get more, the last one is going to be the start and finish, although there should be more. That would be a bad puzzle. Okay, so I think I fixed puzzle class. It will never need fixing again. Okay, this is an error because board is not what it used to be. Alright, so I'm going to go back up the top. I got all sorts of errors because I'm accessing board as an array. It's not. And here board is a mouse path puzzle. Okay, initialize board is actually giving it a puzzle to start. Not sure I really want to do that. I think if I was going to give it anything, I would give it an index to which file, which puzzle should load from the file. I think this was a leftover from before I got the file working properly, just to give it something to load. So, what I want then here puzzle board. It's a new mouse, path, puzzle, and it needs a string, which I don't have. So what I need to do is I'm going to have to call load. Let's go look at load. What does load do now? Load board from an index void. So what I want to do is return the string. look at load board. All of these functions are going to need fixing, but I'm trying to get enough that I can start testing something. Load board is now has to return a string. Let go. I'd like to give it a default puzzle. Really can't. Alright, so make a puzzle string. I don't really need to. It's generates one called puzzle here. Don't want to need that. So it's going to do a. It's going to open up the file. It's going to iterate through the index, and I don't need this part. All I need it to do then is return file puzzle. Before it gets parsed. So that's all that does. All right. On mouse. So what I want to do then is to create this, so I'll tell it to load index 1, first puzzle. This is all test stuff. It's got nothing to do with loading this board. Scales for painting. Things to delete. Moving the board is going to work differently. I'll have to get that, fix that when I get there. Menu doesn't change. The index isn't changing. Drawings aren't changing. Although I probably should eventually change these to away from scale drawings and into geometry drawings. I'm not going to worry about it right now because it's working. Load board should work. Got no reason to think this isn't going to work. Initialize board doesn't actually have to do any of the other stuff. If the point of initialize board is to reset the board, do I have another function for resetting? Reset board. Initialize board, reset board. I think, what does this do differently? So the only difference is initialize board was actually creating the array, which I don't need anymore. All I need is the reset. I don't think I need any of this stuff for initialize. But because I'm paranoid, I'm going to comment it out. in case I want to get something from that later. Reset board. I'm just going to need some help because... Hello? Okay, so it's not a mouse path cell anymore. It is now a mouse path puzzle. Board is test board. Test board is probably the wrong type now as well. Actually, that's in here. Test board is the wrong type. That should also be puzzle now. Okay, so if I'm doing the test, it resets the variables for the test board, determines the size. It is not an array. So I have to adjust how this is accessing cells. So what I want is get cell at the index and set that to east. Oh, and I don't want an index here. Okay, so there's an extra step involved because it's not an array anymore. It's its own class, but it still gets me access to the cells so that I can set flags. Resetting traveled. Test board is now it is now a class and not an array. Test board. Get cell at I. It's not a null pointer. And test board gets cell at I. Set travel. It's false. I tend to spend most of my day programming. I program for my work, and then I do this on my free time for everybody else. I try to stay as ergonomically sound as I can. I need to improve my desk, but I also tend to get up and walk around and do other things too. I like to take a lot of breaks. When I'm working, I take breaks probably at least once an hour to get up and go do something else for a bit. When I'm doing this, because people don't want to watch me walk off and leave for a while. When I'm doing this, I actually sit here. This is the longest I'll sit and program, is generally about 3 hours for a streaming session. And then I have to take a break and go do something else. I do need to improve my desk, though. I intend to. And then it'll reduce the risk. I had a very physically demanding job for a long time, even when I was programming a lot, where I was working outdoors doing a lot of manual labor, and that uses an entirely different set of muscles. It's very exhausting, but can help alleviate some issues. Or lower the risk anyways. Move the board. Remove board. Why am I making a board if I'm removing? It's just deleting whatever I tell it to delete. Okay, so since it's not an array, I don't actually have to do this anymore. All I have to do is delete so it'll look like I need this part. So if test delete test board. Test board is null pointer. I really don't care about the array size anymore because that's part of the board. Drawings didn't get affected by this. Line operation, I just have to, this is okay. I need to change the line operation that takes this parameter, which is this one. So it's now going to take a puzzle pointer. So I need to change the function. It's the header. Okay, so those are all happy. This is going to need to do some extra work now. Staying focused on what you're working on is, being able to stay focused is important, and losing your focus and changing topics or changing subjects or taking a break can be distracting. And for a long time, especially early on, I would continue to code like late into the night because I wasn't paying attention. I missed meals because I enjoyed doing it, and once I was kind of in the zone and working on it, I just ignored everything else in the world. What's helped with that is the realization, years later, that my memory is not perfect. Nobody's is. I had sort of an eye-opening experience once where I realized that my memory sucks, and so does everybody else's. They just don't know it. People don't know it because they don't test it. And what I had to do was start taking very detailed notes about everything that was happening, instructions I was given, things that I had read. I started taking a lot of notes so I could refer back to those instead of trying to trust my memory on all the details. And that, of course, was, made me very aware of how much my memory sucks. And in the process, I started finding an old code that I had, because I didn't document it very well, that it took a long time to parse through old code to understand how I had done something that I had written before. It worked, just didn't understand it. So I've tried to get better at that. What I'm doing here is a terrible example of code. Anything you see on here is probably the worst way of doing most things, because I'm approaching this without a plan and just keep changing it as I go. It's constantly changing. So I try to put some notes in here, but frequently I get lost in what I'm doing. But if you keep thorough notes on what you're working on, and they're good and clear notes, it turns out you can use that if you have to step out of whatever project you're working on to work on another project, or go take a break, or whatever, go on vacation. When you come back to your work, if you've got decent notes, it doesn't take nearly as long to get spun up on where you were and get going again. And if you start getting in the habit of doing that, you can take short or even long breaks periodically with almost no loss to productivity. So I'm not doing it as well here because I'm doing this for my own entertainment. But I do I keep notes about where I'm at on each project. I keep notes about projects that I want to work on next. And then at the end of every session, I try to write down like where I was stuck at the end. It's tougher to do that if I'm not sure what the problem is, and it's the end and I'm tired and I want to stop and go take a nap. If I'm not sure what's broken, my notes may not be very useful. But if I understand what's going on, I just don't have time to fix it, I'll put some very explicit details about what needs to happen next. So when I come back in, I look at it and go, I see what I need to do. So based on what I had yesterday at the end of the day, which I wasn't on very long because I didn't feel well, I wrote that my path extensions were not working. They're working a little better now. To move the start to next and not to the old finish, I did that. I fixed that. And then I had a note about making dynamic indices in my list. That's a huge project. I'm not really sure there's much benefit to doing that. And I'm not sure I'll ever do that. But it was something I was thinking about. So I'm not working on that now. I tend to, because this isn't for work and I don't have deadlines, I can take as long as I need to work on one of these. And so I tend to work on whatever I'm amused with or entertained by or interested in at the moment. And this particular program is one that I like because I like to play this. It's the same reason I spent a lot of time on the solitaire games trying to make an engine that was sort of generic, would accept a generic rule set to play solitaire games. And of course I started with Klondike because it was probably the most common version. But it wasn't really my favorite. And then once I had the generic rule set working, I added a couple of variations of games, and then I got the Yukon game working on solitaire, which is one that I enjoyed playing. I kind of stopped working on that because I wanted to do something different, and it's now functional enough that I can play that game. Which is where I want to get with this one, is to get mouse path to where it will generate a new board or new puzzle for me on the fly. They won't all be good, but enough good ones that I can use this for entertainment, and then start working on some other projects, something else that's fun to do. I'm very self-centered in what I code, unless I'm getting paid for it, in which case then I have to be do whatever I'm told. Life is so hard. Okay, so it can't do that. And because I keep changing my code because I didn't have a plan initially. I have to go through and do things like this afterwards. And this is one, I wrote this months ago and then went on to do some other programs and came back to it. And because I didn't create this puzzle board on this class, and the data that I was collecting for this puzzle kept getting more and more complicated. It should have been a class in the beginning when it was fairly simple. But because I decided to change that later, I have to go through and fix a whole lot of errors introduced by turning this into its own class. But now it will be better. I say that and it's going to crash on me. Just because it can. So these are all the same function. Oh boy, this is going to be a tricky one because it wants a string to initialize, but this needs to be empty. So there's I think I have to put the number first. Yeah, number first. If I didn't have quotation marks inside this thing, it'd be easier, but I have to deal with it. There we go. Okay, so it'll take that string of spaces, put quotation marks at each end, and then start it off with the dimensions, which is what it should look like when it comes out of the file. It's something like this. It's going to be empty. This particular example. Okay. So now I should be able to hand this one then a string. it should be happy with that. List is entirely separate. It doesn't need to initialize for because it's its own class. That's not what I wanted. Undo. Seriously, just stop. I found there's going to be more than just doing this that I have to fix, but I'm not sure what they are yet. I was hoping I wouldn't spend so much time working on this particular issue. But that's what I get for changing my mind and doing things differently. Looks like I'm getting closer to the end. It's almost a solid column of red blocks. It's the most exciting part. This is the exciting part of programming. This is the part that everybody looks forward to. It's just going through and making trivial edits. Okay, so aside from the fact that the errors seem to have cleared, what else do I have to change? So there's going to be some issues about the way it loads the file that are probably going to have to get edited. Drawings don't change. So it takes an index, returns a string. This isn't happening. Reset should work the same way. It's going to do the test board as well, but it should work the same. Resetting the traveled. Don't need any of that. Board with the drawings, line operations. That's fairly trivial. It looks complicated, but that's not super tricky. Starting the mouse, that's the location. Running the mouse. Now that shouldn't change. It should be extracting information correctly. I think the issue is going to be with loading the file, looking at the preview, getting the puzzle count. That shouldn't change. That'll be fine. Generating the board. This is the test board. Generate. Improve the path. It's all test board. All test board. Travel lock path. Test board. Test board. It's all test board. Test board. Board. Paint preview. Okay, so this is not good. So what this is doing is loading the puzzle every time it wants to show what the puzzle looks like. So what I need to do is I've got the string now within the puzzle class. This was a terrible way of doing this. So all I need is file puzzle. Puzzle file. File puzzle isn't, oh there it is, file puzzle, right there. So I don't need those. I still need an X and a Y, the file puzzle. I don't need a line counter. I don't need to know how many puzzles there are. I don't need those. I'm not going to open it. I'm not going to do any of this stuff. So this file then needs to be get original string, which is going to return the string that was loaded. And then it will use that to populate puzzle X, puzzle Y, and then it can use this string, except that this is the problem. paint preview needs to get the string. Because the string isn't necessarily going to be the one that was loaded. In fact, it won't even be in a class. The whole point of the preview is to look at it before I load it into a class. So it needs to just get the string from the file before it's added to a class, before the object has been created. So I'm going to have to look at where paint preview is happening. So the parsing is happening pretty much exactly the way it's doing inside the class. It's painting out information about the board. The preview scale was determined, I guess PC size was, well, maybe not. That preview scale was actually declared here. It is. Comment that out. I'm going to see what that does. Get rid of that. PC size isn't really being used for anything. It was probably trying to make it fit better on the screen, rather than give. So this may just be a more dynamic way of setting the preview scale. I'm not sure. I don't recall. So it's going to iterate through the board and paint the preview. Okay, so now I got to figure out where it's calling paint preview from and make sure that it has the string it needs. And I probably need to hang on to that, so I need to come back in here. Puzzle index. I'll make a puzzle preview. Alright, so I gotta find. So if I've got this set, I don't actually have to pass it a string anymore. It knows what the string is going to be. A little risky because it could still get an invalid string passed. I just got to be careful about what I pass it, because it's not going to validate that it's a number, comma, a number, and then a string within quotation marks, and the number of characters within the string adds up to the two numbers multiplied. It's not doing any of that. It's sort of trusting that the source data was valid. Eventually, I probably want to add some checks like that, but I didn't bother doing that initially. had considered doing that as I was generating different kinds of puzzle files, because especially since they were prone to typos. Something to validate that they were correct and had the correct number of elements at each step. But that started getting very complicated, especially given that they were all a little bit different the way they were laid out. I still want to do that at some point. But it was going to be complicated, and it wasn't as interesting to me, so I still want to do it. Okay, so if I'm on load puzzle, this is where it's going to paint preview. It's going to paint the buttons. It paints which puzzle index I'm on. This is probably all needs to get updated actual buttons, but right now this works. So it actually wants the puzzle preview string, is what I need to send it. And then where I'm going to change the string is where I'm accepting input window messages. Okay, this isn't playing. Load puzzle. I don't care about escape. So if I click the left mouse button and the puzzle index changes, as soon as that happens, puzzle preview needs to be load board for puzzle index. So instead of loading the puzzle every time it wants to paint the preview, which is every screen refresh, which is what it was doing, it's going to load the puzzle one time when I select to go to that puzzle, and then it's going to continue to paint the string that it's already got stored. And it'll do the same thing if it changes in the other direction. Okay, so that done, I want an option now. I need to be able to save any loaded puzzle, and it's not going to do a check to see if that puzzle already exists. But I need some more menu options. Alright, so I'm in main menu where I'm playing the game. Specifying save puzzle because eventually there could be some save game thing to should I add another number? I'm in the habit of getting rid of the numbers lately. I'll go ahead and put a number in. I'm starting to get rid of the key clickable element to some of these. I'm going to get rid of them. All right. Okay, so I got a new button called Save Puzz. Further to go. There we go. Alright. So I'm on mouse path, which is current. I have a new button. I could get rid of these number options in here. I'm not going to worry about it just yet. In fact, I'll add 6 for this one, even though it doesn't paint that on the screen anymore. So if I click on Save Puzz, it needs a new function. So just like, where's it at? There should be a load board. Fingers, please stop doing random things. Okay, so save a board, and all it's going to do is hand it this this string, and it's just going to append that to the end of the file. That's the idea anyways. Let's see how this works out. I'll have to make a backup of my file, because I haven't actually tried appending to a file. So there's a risk that it could erase the puzzles that I do have. So I'm going to have to try some things here. Please join the class. It's going to be a puzzle file. A lot of this stuff isn't going to apply. I'm just going to copy all this. A lot of this will not apply. Don't care about the file line, don't care about that, don't care about that, or that. I don't care how many puzzles there are. I don't care about the index. I believe this has to be OF stream. I'm going to have to do some reading on this one. Don't care about line, counter. I don't care about any of these. Okay, so I need to look some things up briefly. And I do not have my reference text here. Pardon me one moment while I